morning, but that's okay.
Well, there's also
There's
the
a
Power
really
Ranger
popular
is in
panel
the
apparently going on.
Are you kidding? Okay, so fun fact, last time I had a panel at Hal-Con, it was at the same time as the drag show. And I am not as cool as drag queens. I would like to believe that I am. I'm not. So welcome to the people that I don't know personally, which is about 3 of you. Well, lucky for you, you're gonna get some free stuff at the end of this. Oh, another person that I happen to know. Well, I love this. Thank you for the emotional support. We were supposed to initially have multiple people on stage here with me today. Unfortunately, both my copy editor and my artist could not make it because they have loving families and stuff, and beautiful for them. But I'm going to be bringing my main stage energy. I hope you guys are also ready for main stage energy, because even though there's only 3 of you that I don't know by name, I'm really excited to be here. This was supposed to initially be a discussion. I have broken it down into talking points instead, and I'm sure you guys will have some questions if you're interested in Kickstarter or crowdfunding in general. But first things first, I have an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, and just some basic ground rules. I will try to breeze through as much of this as I can within the hour that we have, so we can save questions for the end. And photos and videos are strictly mandatory, because that's how you're going to get some free stuff at the end. I've got 2 copies of our Kickstarted project that you could potentially win. So if you find anything particularly helpful during this talk, or if you like anything that I'm saying, please record it, put it on social media, and tag us at Garnet Gaming, because that's our little group. It is on pretty much every single slide. And there's 3 of you here that I don't know. So 2 of you will be going home with a book if you do that. And for the 3rd person, I also have postcards or additional stickers that were extra backer rewards from our initial Kickstarter that launched in April. All right, now that that is out of the way, my name is Christian Allaire, and I am one of the creatives at a tiny group you have probably not heard of called Garnet Gaming. We were not called Garnet Gaming until very recently, but it is a project that myself and 2 other people have come together to start creating indie RPG content. How this all began is we kickstarted a project called Rise of the Black Coven, which you will be seeing slides rolling across the screen for some of the content in that book. Rise of the Black Coven began as a campaign that I started in, I want to say 2014, but that could be wrong, in my halcyon days of playing Pathfinder. Roll forward a little bit, and we transitioned to 5th edition, and there has always been this kind of lifelong dream that I've had of getting published and being an author and having some sort of artistic merit in the world for myself rather than just for clients. And so I discovered a very nostalgic book at one point when I transitioned to 5th edition called Curse of Strahd. And if you've never played Curse of Strahd, it's my absolute favorite campaign. Go play it, where it combines all the best elements of horror and fantasy together in this perfectly condensed tome. But when I picked it up because it had been one of the first campaigns I had ever played with my original DM, and I was just smitten with it. And from that point on, I knew this is how I'm going to make a book. Because I had thought about writing a fantasy novel for a very long time, and I still probably could have gone that avenue, but that market probably would not have accepted me immediately. But I was a DM for a very long time. Again, pretty much since I started university, so I can actually say I've been playing D&D for more than half my life. So this is where things took off. I ended up having more time on my hands, and I ended up creating the content for Rise of the Black Coven in a 5th edition module. And then I started thinking, I have to get serious about this. Developing Rise of the Black Coven took a while, and eventually through happenstance, I ended up finding an artist. Her name was Danica, and I actually went to high school with her, and I found her here at Hal-Con. And she had just a little promo booklet of some of her artwork, which you are seeing rolling on screen, the artwork that she did for Rise of the Black Coven, and we started talking. We started talking and we started planning. I took creative lead on this project, but gave her art direction, and little by little, we solidified the plan. Now, when you are trying to start a Kickstarter project, there is a moment where you're going to have to decide whether or not you're going to see it through, or you're just going to let this lie. And there's a slide on here that says you have to burn the boats if you want to take the island, and that is that clutch point where you have to decide whether or not you are going to retreat or if you are going to be decidedly determined to take that island and cancel your means of retreat. So we launched. But that is only the beginning of your work. Even if you start a Kickstarter, you're not guaranteed of success. And there's processes of networking that you have to do. You have to pitch your product to a bunch of people. You have to be on social media. And our process was pretty charmed. I ended up talking to a bunch of local vendors. So Mike from Monster Comics and Josh from the Deck Box ended up actually being backers for our initial project. I ended up setting funding goals to get a sponsor. And I thought, let's set things wildly out of reach, and someone actually happened to take me up on it and became our sponsor. And we actually ended up on a podcast, all of which is really great. Because people like being part of cool projects that they believe in, but we're going to be talking about how you create that sort of project that people will want to back and fund. Rise of the Black Coven was a big success, but there's a lot of realities regarding Kickstarter that are very difficult for people to see from the outside. The main reason for that is the only thing you see from Kickstarter are the successes. You never see the Kickstarters that fail because they kind of disappear. Unfortunately for those creatives that invested a lot of time and effort into them. So that's what we're going to be talking about now going forward. Again, this was supposed to be a discussion panel, so I'm going to be going through my talking points. Forgive me as I look down at my sheet. So our story has a happy ending. I want to make sure that people who are creative in this room, and I presume anyone who is attending this panel either really likes D&D or wants to make their own project a reality in the future. Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good, cool. So, the first thing you have to ask before you embark on a Kickstarter, and if you are in the same boat as me, you wanted to create an RPG book, you have to ask yourself if there is a market for it. There is clearly a market for D&D stuff. We're all here, we're all at Hal-Con. There are people here spending tons of money upstairs. So yes, there is a market for this type of product. What does your product entail? Is your product going to be something that would be better suited for a publishing house, or do you actually want to go the route of self-publishing? That is also something you're going to have to consider because the avenues are very different. If you're getting published by someone else, I can't help you with that today, but it's definitely valid. Cobalt Press is a great example of a small indie publisher. They're not necessarily always accepting submissions, but they could be an avenue that you could work with if you didn't want to go the Kickstarter route. A question you should ask with your product is, has it been done before? So I took inspiration from Curse of Strahd for a lot of things for this book, namely structural inspiration and the fact that I love Gothic horror, so I added a lot of spooky elements to Rise of the Black Coven. So that was very fun for me to draw inspiration from, but I wanted to make sure that the book was intrinsically different. Because if you're just recreating a vampire Gothic narrative, people aren't going to be as interested in it unless you have something new to bring to the table than they would be if they were just going to buy Curse of Strahd. You as an indie creator are fighting an uphill battle, and you have to think of yourself as a small business owner. The other small indie people that you know can be collaborative workers with you, but they're also your competition, and your biggest competition are always going to be the big publishing houses because they have name brand recognition and they have clout. So you need to bring something to the table that is different from them, or your story of what you are bringing. Not necessarily the story, the narrative of your book, but the story of its creation has to be different enough to draw people's attention. What makes your story unique is going to be more important than the actual content of the story for selling it. Kickstarter is fundamentally a selling platform. It is to pre-sell your product before it exists to make sure that your product isn't a net loss for you. Another thing regarding that uniqueness is finding a particular niche. A lot of products have this. One of the niches that I wanted to fulfill with Rise of the Black Coven was queer representation. I also wanted it to be spooky, kind of based in Fae lore, but queer representation was super important to me because it's not something we necessarily see in the fantasy genre all the time. It's getting better, things are getting better, but there's a lot more queer baiting than anything. But platforms like Kickstarter want to see product niches like that fulfilled. You will specifically, if you do plan a Kickstarter, get the option to tick a box. Does this product support LGBTQ+ initiatives? Is this product supporting environmentally friendly initiatives? And other such elements like that. Is this created by a person of color? Is this created by a person who is a visible minority? Is this person a creator who has a disability? Is it focused towards those different communities to appeal to them who have been marginalized or underrepresented in the media? And it doesn't have to apply strictly to RPG content, but that is just, again, the avenue we're talking about today. So if your product that you are considering has any of those particular niches and appeals to those communities, you will also have a leg up in your Kickstarter itself. So how do you start planning your project? That is difficult. I started because I had a lot of campaign notes from one of the first campaigns I DM'd. I stripped it down, I made it modernized for 5th edition, and then I was ready to go with a more or less made product already. So there were just logistical things that I needed to tackle. But if you were to start a project, and I'm gonna pull the crap. If you were to start a project today, and you already have most of your conceptual work done, you have most of the writing done, what is the very next step that you are gonna have to do? I'm gonna start calling names. No, you need a budget. A lot of being a creative on your own means you're gonna do a lot of math and spreadsheets, and you're gonna be doing a lot of communications work. You need quotes for absolutely everything you want to bring to the table. It is tedious. It is really tedious work. I want this panel to be uplifting, but there's a lot of realities I also want to confront people with too. The one gracious laugh. Because it's a very stressful thing. When you start creating a product and you want to launch it for Kickstarter, whether or not you describe yourself this way, you are effectively undertaking the role of a small business owner. So, you need to know what things cost. Get multiple quotes for absolutely everything you're going to do. I was printing a book. I needed multiple quotes for what a hardcover book was going to be. I had a vision in mind. I wanted it to look like a standard Dungeons & Dragons manual, so I needed those dimensions. I needed the printer to give me quotes on what hardcover would be, what different page glosses would cost me, what color would cost versus black and white. If you want one of those little tassel things, your final product has to be a vision that you have in your mind. Any sort of stretch goals or extra awards that you want to tack on also have to be costed out and figured into your budget as well. Because that's going to determine what your funding goal is for Kickstarter. I'm going to hammer home the budget a lot, because the budget's the most important thing, because we're all trying to get money from Kickstarter. Kickstarter also takes a portion of your proceeds, so you're going to need to factor that into your budget as well. Your time costs money. If you want to make any sort of profit on your Kickstarter, you will need to factor in the time that you invest in your product. Additional people's time costs money. And I've got some slides up there that say hire people, have a team. You will need those people to help you complete your project. You might be one of those perfect individuals who can do absolutely everything without error, but a teammate will help you catch your mistakes. It will also help alleviate some of your stress. But a lot of people, most people in Canada or USA, live in a capitalistic society who you need to exchange money for goods and services. So they want to be paid for their work on your RPG project. It might be a passion project for you, but it's not necessarily a passion project for them. So factor in their costs into your budget as well. Hire an artist if you're looking to produce one of these manuals. Art is not cheap, art takes time. That was probably one of the largest costs. Then, after all is said and done, you are playing a numbers game. So for example, printing in Canada is a little bit trickier than printing in the US. I wanted to keep things simple and keep things Canadian. Also, a point towards Kickstarter is you have to decide what sort of currency you want to be paid in. But I wanted to exclusively use Canadian printers, Canadian vendors, etc. The numbers game of books. If I were to order a single copy of this book, it would cost about $128 Canadian plus shipping. If I were to order 100 copies of this book, each individual copy would cost about $40 Canadian plus shipping for the whole lot of them. The more books you sell, the better the individual prices are, but you cannot necessarily always guarantee that you will get that volume on Kickstarter. That's why you're setting a goal. If you exceed that goal, presumably you have enough money to continue printing, because each additional book that you would produce costs the same at the Kickstarter level, but becomes cheaper from the production level. Budgeting's important. Keep spreadsheets, have math. And in the same vein as the budget, you will have to keep things in mind for your taxes. Because Kickstarter counts as income. Then, boo, boo, boo! Yes, you will be taxed on your Kickstarter. Not immediately, but if you have a massively successful Kickstarter, which I wish on everyone here who is thinking of undertaking a project, if you suddenly get a huge influx of cash into your bank account, the CRA will take note of this, so you have to declare. Luckily, you are a small business owner at this point, an entrepreneur under yourself, so there are a lot of things that are costs in the Kickstarter that you can then write off on your There are a lot of things in the Kickstarter that you pay for on Kickstarter or through doing your project and developing your product that you can then write off on your taxes. So it can help, it will potentially come out in the wash, but it is another thing to consider. Finally, for your budget, Kickstarter takes a cut. They make money when you make money. They want you to make money. Kickstarter really wants you to make money. If you have a product that they think will do really well and fits a lot of niches, they will help promote you, which is fantastic. But you have to, and this, we won't get into this part of the budgeting too much because they have a handy dandy calculator, but they will help you reach your goal to a certain degree. They will not do everything for you, but they get paid when you get paid. But you must account for that because you are not going to make all of the money that Kickstarter says it has amassed. They are going to take a chunk of it away from you. They will again help you with their calculator to determine how much you will need after their cut. And then we can't fault them for this. This is how they make money. This is the entire business model. They are giving you a platform through which you can pre-sell a product for free. You can use and leverage their business tools essentially for free, and all they ask is that you share in your proceeds. Very handy. But you will have to factor that in the final count at the end of the day. Now, Kickstarter is also an all or nothing platform, which is very stressful. I thought pre-pandemic, pre-Kickstarter, I was good at handling stress. I have thought now very differently. When you're planning your project, if you are the type of person who looks at those little numbers go up and down, you're gonna have a bad time. It can be very rewarding. It can be very, very rewarding when you're planning your project to see those numbers go up. But then every time you have one of those days when the numbers don't go up, it's gonna feel really bad. I say this to caution people and to warn them to be prepared for this, but also because they are going to need to do the majority of the legwork when planning their Kickstarter. You need to network. You need to use social media. You need to get out on every platform that you can to talk about your product until you are blue in the face. Most shorter time frame projects do better than long-term projects. Kickstarter allows you to do as short as a week or as long as 2 months for your project to earn the funds necessary. And they also have a pre-launch phase where you can build up hype and get people interested in your project, where it's like a splash page on a website. Basically, people can register to get notified whenever your project actually launches. I would recommend using that feature for as long as you can in order to build up the necessary hype for your project. Because it's all you. If you don't have funds for a product, you don't have funds for advertising. If you are fortunate enough to have a little bit of seed money for this, advertising can be a big help. But otherwise, it's gonna be you doing a lot of the legwork. Your friends and family will also be the first people to support you and the first people to drive you absolutely crazy. There's a slide on here that says you will turn a stranger into a client sooner than, you will turn a client into a friend sooner than you will turn a friend into a client. And that is something to keep in mind. Because I still talk to people who are asking me how this Kickstarter is going. Is going. We're on our second Kickstarter, which has now been funded. There's another slide for that. But I still have people who have been paying attention to me on social media, who know me personally, who I have their contact information in my phone, who I have messaged directly about me doing a project, this one being a passion project, who still have not taken the time of day to find out more about it, other than occasionally when we meet up at parties or where have you. There are people that I know who keep telling me, that they really like what I'm doing. And then I'll ask them, have you shared it on social media? Have you backed it? And I know they haven't backed it. I can see the names. And they haven't. And I can't fault them because it's not their passion project. It's frustrating, it's aggravating, and it gnaws at you a little bit. Again, stress. Stress management, very important for a Kickstarter. But you have to realize that this is your passion project, not theirs. And a lot of people will come out to support you, and I see a lot of my friends are here to support you for this, which is really nice. But there's a lot of other people that won't give you the time of day. Rise of the Black Coven was also, I mean it in the strictest sense, it was a passion project. It wasn't one where I was trying to turn a profit, which I think was helpful for its own narrative. And there are more people that came out to support this one than our second Kickstarter. But even just asking a friend to help support you by sharing stuff on social media can have you feel like you are chewing on tin foil. It's the simplest thing in the world. And somehow, for some reason, it is very difficult for people to do that. But try. Try to get them to do that. You have to network. You have to try to social media, get engagement on social media. You have to build hype, because it's not gonna just happen for you. In the same vein, I mentioned earlier that we did some legwork talking with local businesses. A lot of people will turn you down. I had a personal relationship knowing Mike for years beforehand, and he backed us. Also, if you're interested in copies, if you don't win one of the copies at the end of this session, for the newcomers, I was saying that photos are really encouraged and tagging us at Garnet Gaming so that you could win one of the copies of Rise of the Black Coven at the end of this panel. So, for those of you that missed that, and for anyone interested, Mike has copies at the Monster Comic booth upstairs. Yeah, I had a personal relationship with Mike beforehand, knowing him friends for years, and so he was eager to back. For everyone else that I didn't really know, I brought out metric sheets. I was showing people what my engagement was like on social media. I don't have a ton of it. I got really lucky with one TikTok video. I got really lucky with one TikTok video that had a lot of views that spiked the way my engagement looked. That helped a lot. And Josh ended up talking to me about the project, and he ended up backing me as well. So the deck box also has copies too. But there's a lot of people that wasn't enough either. I didn't really know Josh that well. We've since chatted a bit more, and we've become much more familiar since. But you're essentially going to have to take a lot of rejection. But you have to be prepared for that and put in the legwork to do it, because you don't know who will back you. We also, I mentioned this at the beginning of the talk, put an outlandish goal on our Kickstarter. We put a pledge ranking of like $2,000 to become the sponsor. And essentially said, hey, if it happens, it happens. It's great. They'll get their logo on the front of the book. And someone reached out. You don't know who you don't know. That could happen. Aim high. Aim very high. If you don't have a big social media network, if you can't rely on Kickstarter for its own advertising, there's other venues that you can do too. Speak out at local events. Here we are! Network with the people that you meet at Hal-Con, because they will be your biggest supporters. You should also consider advertising on Reddit. That's tricky because a lot of people don't like self-promotion on Reddit, but you can start discussions about stuff on Reddit to get people to know you, and then you can make friends on Reddit who will then support you. That's also very helpful. Networking is the next most important thing after your budget, because that is how you are going to actually get the money you need. Okay, so we've talked about assembling a team a little bit, we've talked about our budget, and we've talked about networking. What does your project look like now? The next thing you have to be very wary about when you are doing a Kickstarter is scope creep. Who here has any idea what that means? Okay, perfect. This is something that we're now encountering now that our team dynamic has changed a little bit, and that we are trying to curtail. So when we did Rise of the Black Coven, it was pretty much my baby, and I hired both Mead, our copy editor, and Danica as contractors. Now that we're doing things as Garnet Gaming, we are collaborators, and we all have creative ideas. And we're all really excited for those creative ideas, which is great because that gives us a lot of material to work with. What's bad is that we cannot feasibly implement all of it. This applies to your Kickstarter in a couple different ways, because you will have backer rewards. Keep your backer rewards simple and make them achievable. If you have a pie-in-the-sky vision for your book, start there. You might have extra ideas that you want to implement later, but make sure that they are still in line with your initial concept to avoid going way out of scope. So, as an example, say I wanted to also have a tassel added, and we went way over budget, or we went way over our funding goals. Now we can add the tassel because we have the money to do that. We're still just printing a book. But what we're not doing is adding individually sourced minis for this book to compensate for all the enemies that we need to create for the book. Well, now we have to hire someone who can model those. Now we have to print them. Now we have to figure out the shipping logistics for those. Minis are fragile, so those aren't going to be shipped easily. A book ships flat. This will fit in a bubble mailer. Minis need a box. There's a lot of logistical elements that as soon as you add something more complex to your product, balloon your project's budget, and take things out of scope. So be wary of that. You will get excited, and that's a good thing. But you have to temper your excitement with rationality, that thing that we hate so very much. Think of it this way: grow your product versus expanding it. Make your initial product better, and think of expansion later. Especially if this is your first time doing this. Keep things in your wheelhouse that you know you can accomplish. I have a question for everyone. Knowing all this, knowing that things cost money and have logistical elements and that you need to network and that you need to do all of these things in order to make your Kickstarter a success, what happens if you fail?
Lose the money that you invested in it.
Okay, that's one. Okay, hopefully, because you're doing a Kickstarter and crowdfunding thing, you haven't invested a lot of money. If you have, it's hopefully pennies. But to the 6 people that I don't know in the audience, to the 6 people that don't know me personally, what happens if you fail?
Reassess and try again.
Yes! You only fail if you let failure stop you. You have theoretically lost nothing but time. You have developed your product, you've started networking, you've started building hype. If you haven't spent any money on advertising, there is nothing stopping you from reassessing what you did wrong and trying again. Failure is horrifying to a lot of people, but it is not final. Failure is only an ending if you allow it to be an ending. And if it is that easy to dissuade you from doing this, then you were never going to get it off the ground in the first place because any little roadblock would have stopped you. I say this with an element of privilege because I've had 2 successful Kickstarters, so I recognize that. But I have been braced every single time to not have it go through. When Rise of the Black Coven was nearing its end point, very stressful, we were missing like $1,000, I started talking about how much money I needed to raise on my own, from my own personal funds to push it through. It's about that time that we ended up getting the sponsor and not needing that, which was fantastic. But I was prepared to put my own money into it at that point. If you are planning on putting your own money into your Kickstarter, wait till the end. Wait till the end to see how much money is left that you need. Again, you will lose money in this deal because Kickstarter will take a cut, but that money will come back to you eventually. Okay. So, crowdfunding is stressful. Crowdfunding costs money. Crowdfunding is difficult. You would choose Kickstarter over something like GoFundMe because Kickstarter has more business-related tools. GoFundMe typically has more philanthropic-related tools. Either or can be very stressful. Kickstarter, again, won't give you money if you don't succeed, so don't put your money into it unless you know you can succeed. And something to bear in mind is that you will be tired. You will be very tired by the end of your Kickstarter, maybe halfway through your Kickstarter. We've now done one that was 2 months long, and then our Undead Legions one, which has a panel going through here, that was a single month long, and everyone was exhausted by the midway point for each of them. By the time you are starting to get exhausted about talking about something, that is when people are finally starting to take notice. That is when someone's like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. You posted something about that 2 weeks ago, right? It's like, no, I've been posting about it every day. That's the moment when you should start seeing more returns. You will be exhausted of your Kickstarter far before anyone else will have even taken notice. Other than, hopefully, your close friends and family who will be the first initial people to support you, and then the people who aggravate you again. Again, family, it's difficult. Your busiest time in your Kickstarter will be when you first launch it, when it's fresh, and at the very end. That is when Kickstarter will promote you the heaviest, unless you have a particular niche. Don't give up. It can be very, very enticing to say, screw it, but that's why you burn the boats. You keep it yourself in your pre-launch phase as long as you can to build up your hype. And then when you click that launch button, there's no turning back. There's a slide on here that says, how do you take the island? You've got to burn the boats. That's because you leave yourself no avenue for retreat. It's real. You're tired, but it's real. Keep at it. Failure doesn't stop you. You can keep at it. It might be exhausting, but if it's your passion project, you will eventually make it. If not profitably, you can still make it. Okay, so now you've potentially successfully completed your Kickstarter, you've marketed it to hell and back, and now you've got to actually make the product. Hopefully you've assembled a team that has the skill sets that you need, because you're going to need people. Again, if you're doing a book, you are going to need a graphic designer. You're going to need an illustrator if you want illustrations. You're going to need a copy editor. You're going to need a proofreader. Hopefully multiple people can do multiple jobs, but you are going to need a team of people to go through this. And these people have schedules. How dare they? Give yourself runway. We set our goal time to have this book published, printed, shipped, delivered by Christmas this year. We have set our expectations, because that's what happens. People set their expectations on Kickstarter, and they think that products will take a long time. We got this done in April. This was shipped out, sent out, finished by April. We gave ourselves that runway in case anything went wrong, because things can go wrong. You should proof your work. You should get a proof of your book. You should get a proof of anything that you are going to produce en masse. You have to check that work. Make sure the printer didn't accidentally choose the wrong color profile to print your work. That's why you proof it. Because if you sign off on nothing, or don't proof anything, and the printer screws up, that's on you. You need them to proof it so that you can sign off on the finalized product, and if you catch any mistakes, you fix them, get another proof. That's why getting one book is very expensive. Proofing costs money. But you have that runway if you set enough time in between the delivery and the development to actually catch those mistakes. Because if you sign off on a proof, you've signed away your right to complain. So make sure you catch those things, give yourself time to review them, and if the printer does screw up, then they owe you money back, and you've just got a bunch of dead copies of a book. Not necessarily dead, you can probably still use them. Know who is best at catching those mistakes. If you are not a details-oriented person, if you're the big picture story person, you will need an editor to do this. I cannot stress enough how badly people need editors. Mead, who is our copy editor and one of our creative writers, she's going to pop up on the slide at some point or another if you haven't seen her already, has gotten a lot of contract work based on her work with Rise of the Black Coven since then. She has been working pretty much non-stop for other indie RPG creators, and it's amazing. And she is very sad a lot of the time that the creatives that come to her with a nearly finished product that is riddled with errors. And as a creative writer, she wants to help them. She wants to help them fix mistakes. But they can't necessarily do that because their time limit is too short. So they essentially need a proofreader, and that's all that they're fixing. But they're not fixing any continuity errors, they're not fixing any issues with their scripts, they're not fixing any issues with their tables. They are not fixing anything else. They are proofreading, that's it. Give yourself time, trust your editor, and get a proof. And this would have been very different with a group of people up here with me. The presentation of your product matters. How you set up and talk about your product will matter to people after your Kickstarter is done. One of the things I like to emphasize again with Rise of the Black Coven is the queer-focused aspect, because that is how you start building an audience for your next project. Know who your market is. Know who you're talking to. You can't talk to everybody. I didn't mean for this to be like a marketing demo, but you need to have an audience for your product. You're a small business owner now. So how you talk about your product post-development matters a lot, because those are going to be the people that will support you in the future. You won't necessarily get your friends and family pitching money every time you do one of these projects, or it'll be different friends and family. Again, the friends and family, it's really difficult to get them on board every time. Talk to an audience, and then continue building that audience
as you are delivering the product. An important thing to note here too is there are different phases to your Kickstarter that you're going to want to have. Development is its own phase. While you're promoting your Kickstarter, don't waste your time developing your product. Not yet. If you've already developed to a certain point, great, but now is the time to focus your energies on promoting. If you get funded and get your money, continue development. If you fail and don't get money, you can continue development. The networking and the social media aspect is very time consuming. It's a reason why people have full-time jobs for this now. It's exhausting. Okay, let's see. Those were the main talking points I wanted to cover about the experience in general with Kickstarter. There's less back and forth because my artist and my copy editor aren't here. But, how much time do we have left also?
25 minutes.
Great, perfect. This is about where I was hoping we would be at this point in the game. Because I wanted to talk to you about the two different experiences with our two different Kickstarters. And then we have plenty of time for questions at the end. There's not a ton of people here, so hopefully there'll be some questions to fill in that gap. I was expecting more people. Anyway, Rise of the Black Coven was a passion project. A lot of people gravitated to that passion. We also made our budget very public. One of my friends came up to me and said, "Hey, I just backed your project, but it seems like at the end of the day, you're set up to make none money." And I said, yes, that is the exact amount of money I'm going to make at the end of the day. We have made, I think, $80 off of Rise of the Black Coven. That is very intentional. When I set out to make this book, it was to make it so that there was a queer-focused RPG that was accessible to people. So even now, the digital copies are free. You can pay what you want for them. That's where the $80 comes from. Or you can download it for zero money. Right now, because of everything that's happening in the USA, and things are very scary, any of the proceeds we're getting from Rise of the Black Coven right now, which we are promoting, and promoting a little bit more heavily, are being donated to the Rainbow Railroad, because there's a lot of people that want to get out of red states and want to go into blue states. Rise of the Black Coven has a story that was very successful because of that queer focus. And then we turned our attention to trying to do Kickstarter for profit. We wanted to make money off of we live in a capitalistic society, guys. We have to exchange money for goods and services. That's painful, but it's what we have to do. So we decided that we would try to do something creative instead of our very soul-sucking day jobs in order to try to make money. Which is why you will see the panel at some point on the slideshow for Undead Legions, which we've put a lot of front-loaded work into. So we had most things finalized, written. We ended up getting a lot of artwork up front. Not as much as we would have liked. Some life things happen. If you have a life, things happen in it. You might be put off schedule because of big life events. That doesn't mean your Kickstarter will stop going if you've already turned it on. Once you flip that switch, there's no going back. So we didn't have as much artwork as we wanted for our second Kickstarter. But the nice thing that will happen if you have a successful first Kickstarter is that you will hopefully have a bit of a following. That network that you've created and spent time doing, hopefully, if they still like you and they like the product that you delivered, will be back to support you again, which is great. So everything was going hunky-dory A-okay. We set our sights smaller because we were doing a much smaller product, and we wanted to test the way we were going to work together a little bit differently. So again, when we were doing Rise, it was pretty much my little baby. This was my writing, and I was hiring out Mead and Danica to be contractors for me. In this new format that we're doing, we are co-collaborators, sharing everything, collaborating on ideas, and we don't necessarily have one creative director, but we wanted to make this work a little bit differently. Splitting the funding and testing out how this works creatively as a workflow process. So we set our sights a little bit lower for our funding goal. Much lower, actually. We set our sights for Rise at just over $9,000, which is a hefty penny. We used every single one of those dollars. We went over on our Kickstarter for Rise. We went to about 156% funded, which was great, in large part due to the fact that we ended up getting a sponsor. We set our sights lower for Undead Legions at $2,700. We thought that would be very easy to accomplish. And it was dramatic. we ended up getting a lot of support from the initial people, which was so great. People showed up, we were funded very quickly, and we got our sponsor back. They believed in us enough to come back and fork over a lot more money, which was great. So we were sitting high on our high horse for quite a while, effectively living not stress-free. There's never a moment when you turn on your Kickstarter where you will be stress-free, because you'll probably, if you're like, I'm manic, I don't know if you can tell, the way I'm up on stage, like moving back and forth, the way I'm talking, the energy here. I'm a bit manic when it comes to checking these numbers. So I was checking the numbers every day. The numbers go up, feel good, endorphins. Numbers go down, feel bad, sad, cry from bad. The red numbers are very stressful, and you don't know why the people leave the red numbers. But my sponsor told me. My sponsor messaged me with 2 days to go in our Kickstarter. Hi, I hope you're doing well. I need to back out. Okay, Jeff. I mean, I can't stop you from backing out. His dad needed a medical procedure, and he lives in the US, and he needed a lot of money up front. Communication is key. He could have told me a little earlier, and it probably would have been a little easier to plan around that, because honestly, we were sitting on our laurels very comfortably. Don't do that. You still need to hustle and network and do everything that you were going to do, even if it looks like you're funded. Because until that funding closes and people can't withdraw their money, people can withdraw their money. The experience was probably more stressful and stress-loaded at the very end because of the amount of money he withdrew. Because if people see a project is funded and they don't feel connected with the story, like I said, this was very queer-focused. We were talking to the queer community. We were talking about representation. For Undead Legions, we're just talking about zombies. We're just talking about, we're writing a book about zombies. There's no narrative regarding the product that was captivating to people, and it didn't necessarily talk with any community other than general nerddom people who play 5th edition. Our audience was very different, even though we still had people who came out to support us, but we were still offering the same sort of low entry point packages for people to come in, and we weren't offering a print product, because again, we wanted to simplify things a little bit. So it wasn't necessarily as a compelling narrative the second time we did a product. So people backing out, our sponsor backing out at the last minute, very stressful. The long and short of this is we did end up getting funding, because as I had mentioned, the last couple days of your Kickstarter are going to be your most profitable ones, in addition to the opening couple of days. But the experience was very different. I had said this before, and I'm going to hammer it home again. The story surrounding your product is more important than the actual content of the product itself. And I know this for a fact because I only know a handful of people who have actually read this book. A very few number of people that I know personally have read this book. Most of them are in this room. The rest of the people that back me have not necessarily cracked it open. My dad hasn't cracked it open. He's like, oh, well, it might be worth something someday. I have no illusions of that. It is absolutely not going to be worth something one day. It's 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Have you seen what 4th edition books cost now? Nothing. As soon as they release the next edition, this is going to be a paperweight of paper. But the story around the creation of the product is what made people endeared to it. And that is how you will make your Kickstarter successful, by having a narrative around your product that people can gravitate towards. Our Undead Legions campaign, we're really proud of the content that we created. We're really proud of this series of undead-themed dungeons. We're really excited to get it to people. It did not sell as well. It succeeded, we got funded, but it did not sell as well. There are realities of doing this that you have to take, that it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be fun. And it might not always be successful. We've gotten lucky!
Woo.
Woo! Yay! Pity whistles. But that won't necessarily be the case. So make sure you put the legwork in and talk to people. And if you're thinking of launching your Kickstarter, start promoting it now. That's the long and short of it. I'm sure for the, again, 6 people I don't know, you have questions if you're interested in starting a Kickstarter that I maybe have not covered. So, and we're not many people in this room right now. If you have one of those questions, please raise your hand, and I will do my best to answer them as best I can. Way at the back.
I actually really appreciate that you're speaking a lot about the difficulties and stresses, because I think that's true. A lot of people I don't think would think of those things going in. And that being said, you know, you're saying this all with the lens of not to give up and to go for it, but be aware of difficulties so that you can manage that and be more successful, not only with like your project, but your mental health. So I appreciate that a lot. My question is, that all being said, what was some of your favorite positives and like fun aspects of the process? Whether that be maybe the collaborative nature or maybe specifically writing or, you know, things like that. Like what were some of your favorite parts of it? Like despite the stress and the difficulties.
Having a team really helps to mitigate the stress. And I will say a lot of my favorite aspects of doing this were working collaboratively with Mead and Danica. Mead for a different reason than with Danica. With Danica, it was, I got really excited whenever I would send art direction to her. So my background is in graphic design, I have done art direction before, and Danica and I were just, we jived. We were on the same wavelength for a lot of things, but also I knew what my expectations were. I had seen her style, I had seen her illustrations, and I was saying things in language and terms that she already was using. But then she'd come back to me with these amazing concepts, which some of which you're seeing on here, that I was so excited, and then it was the difficult decision of having to choose a concept. But that's really cool. It's really exciting to see your vision come to life in an artist's hands. For Mead, the exciting portion of working with her was that she would call me on, there's no kids in the audience. She would call me on my bullshit, and it was really refreshing. So if ever I had written something when she was going over the text that I knew was kind of weak, she would come up and say, hey, can we fix this to this? Yes, thank you, that is perfect. That is, yes, wonderful. Because you will get critical of your own work. If you ever looked at your past writing or past illustrations or past anything that you've done, you might cringe at it a little bit. Like looking at your notes from high school is very cringeworthy. But when it's modern and you think like, this is the best I can do right now, and then you get a really helpful suggestion, that feels good. It's like, no, I can improve. I can improve, and improvement is a very helpful feeling. We got other questions. We got a hand over here.
So you mentioned that Rise of the Black Coven is very queer focused, and that was your kind of overarching story around the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how you inject queerness into a Dungeons & Dragons adventure, where by the nature of Dungeons & Dragons, it is sort of a collaborative story by the people at the table. How do you have those identities written into the book in a way that feels less clunky, and then you have people debating, oh, okay, there's just added on, it's extra, it's superfluous. Can you talk about how you went about and did that?
So yeah, one, you can't force DMs or tables to adopt anything. When you're creating a campaign, you are essentially laying the track, and they decide when they go off track. So if someone takes your book, they have complete autonomy over how they use it. Once you set that out into the world, it's no longer your baby. So people will take it and they will play it however they want, so you can't really control for that particular aspect. One of the things I wanted to include is just a diverse cast of characters and give hints as to how they would act in certain situations. But you still can't control for everyone because everyone's going to play a little bit differently. Some of the things I wanted to include were just a world where being queer is normalized, and so people aren't afraid to just be queer publicly. I wanted to avoid, I very stringently wanted to avoid a lot of the tropes surrounding queer media, where like, oh, the coming out story is the biggest story. No, it's not. That is one story, and it doesn't exist in a world where people don't care if you're queer. I also wanted to avoid putting any queer people into direct harm's way. Again, it's D&D collaborative storytelling. Queer people might be endangered because combat happens in D&D. But I wanted to avoid any narratives where that happens by default. The tricky thing is that we're dealing with a fantasy medium where the goal is that queerness is just present in the world. And it's kind of idealized in that if it's just present in the world and there is no homophobia towards people of different sexual orientation or people expressing themselves differently on the gender spectrum, it's not going to come up as much. So it's more written as guidelines to how a character might interact, but also depending on your table, it might not come up at all. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Anybody else asking questions regarding Kickstarter study? Yeah.
I missed the first little bit, so you may have discussed this in
For sure.
Danica and Mead,
Yep.
were you guys friends and you sort of came together to create this, or?
So I knew Mead before, and she had worked with me at a marketing agency before. And she had been a copy editor there. So we had that friend connection. Danica I actually met at Hal-Con again. So I had known Danica in high school and had no idea what she had been doing with life. And then I come to Hal-Con one year, and she's there with a booth. And then she's got this art style, and I'm absolutely enchanted by it. And I just ask her if she wants to work together.
Oh, nice.
So I had known her, but we were not close before this. Again, you are here and present. This is going to be one of your greatest networking opportunities imaginable. So if you want to work with someone in particular, reach out to them. You never know until you try. Oh, yes?
Did you have any tips or wanted to share any experiences about how networking on social media was different or challenging than networking in person?
Oh, yeah. Social media is terrible. I hate it. And I can't stop using it because now I'm a business owner. Social media is very disposable media. You will spend a lot of time crafting a post that someone, if you are lucky, will look at for 2 seconds and go, ah. And then it's gone. It is difficult to network on social media, but you should know your audience. So I was trying to reach out to a lot of other people in the queer community. Networking in person isn't necessarily like that because it's harder to tell. People aren't using emojis with little flags in real life. Right? So, thank you. Again, pity laughs.
That was good. That was good.
So it's easier to find your audience online because the algorithm is going to help you if you use the right hashtags. And then it's just talking with people. Talking with people is the easiest way to get people to like you, and it's the easiest way to get them to like your product. And again, for some reason, I don't know what this reason is. It is a lot easier to convince a complete stranger to back you on Kickstarter than it is to convince a lot of your friends and family. So once you get past that initial stage of saying, hi, how are you, by the way, for some reason, it becomes really simple. You just, again, need to put yourself out there. Yes?
On the same sort of note with social media, like you can hire a copier, like an editor and things like that. If you were like, I don't know what a TikTok is, I don't do any of that, are there people that you could hire? Like, or would it be more personable to kind of go your own?
You will need to hire a social media person if you don't know anything about social media and you don't want to spend the time on it. Social media takes time. It doesn't take a genius to do it. Anyone can do it. Children are doing it and very successfully. You can figure it out.
Do they have good rates?
Sometimes, actually. Influencer marketing is really useful, as well as using a person who is a known influencer to help you with your social media. Their rates vary. Some people don't know the value of what they're doing. But you can definitely hire social media managers, but the trick is they don't necessarily know more than you, because the algorithms for Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are always changing. Like the way that those community-based platforms operate is constantly in flux. So what works for 2 months might be completely different in like 60 days from now. Hashtags used to be king. Hashtags are okay now, but they're not necessarily the most useful thing. For a while, there was a trend of 1-second videos because that would loop the video enough times that it would count as multiple plays, and then plays were the amount of things that you needed. And so that was trendy for a while until, again, the algorithm caught wind of that and was like, okay, we're gonna put a stop on that because this isn't good content that we wanna promote. This is a 1-second video, it's garbage. But that's the game you're playing. Again, I didn't want this to be like a full-on marketing panel, but some marketing tips for you. The algorithm changes. You can hire a social media manager if you don't have time, but they will not necessarily know more than you. They'll say they know more than you, though. So bear in mind that. Way in the back again.
Just wondering, maybe a good note to end on, but I was wondering if there's any projects that Garnet Gaming was excited about in the future that you may want to sneak peek mention, or maybe like a potential.
Oh my God, yes. So many. We've only got 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna do this and we're gonna do the wrap up for the books. So if you haven't posted or tagged us on social media, do it now for the 6 of you again that I don't know personally, so that you can get one of the books or postcards. But projects that we are working on, so right now it's the Undead Legions Kickstarter, so we are developing that. Did it pop up?
It
Oh, perfect timing. So that one will be released relatively soon. Other elements that we wanted to do, there is a campaign that we are working on, we're playtesting right now called Curse of the Sea Witch, which will be, again, spooky and dark, and eventually we will be launching as a full-fledged book very similar to Rise of the Black Coven. Other things that we want to work on, I can't speak for everyone because we've got this long list of things that we have in a document of things that we want to eventually bring to light. Something I want to bring forward is a really spooky bestiary about unicorns.
Amazing.
I'm following a theme today. This is my theme. Unicorns they're fun. So I want to do that. I also have a concept in mind for a bestiary based off of the tarot that is also, I don't want to say body horror inspired, but weird. We have found a niche in being kind of spooky. I don't know if we'll stay in that niche, but you can expect more spooky projects in the future. All right. You who are recording, may I have my phone back?
Okay.